While this particular planet is now part of the Pact Worlds, they have caused some very significant problems in the early years of the Pact Worlds. Not the planet, but the people that live on this planet. Today we're going to be talking about Eox. Eox wasn't always the barren gray dust ball that it is. It used to be a lush and very bountiful and plentiful world. The dominant species of that planet was the Alibrians. I think I'm saying that right. They looked very similar to humans, except their skulls were just a little bit bigger. Better brains. The Alibrians were very technologically and magically inclined, and they got a little bit big for their craniums. The Alibrians sought a technological power to be able to destroy other planets. There was a particular planet that the Alibrians decided to use their planet-destroying weapon on, and when they fired it, it worked. So, quelle surprise! The planets were called the Twins, and they blew up into basically what is now known as the Diaspora. So the Eoxians created the Diaspora. The problem with firing such a very powerful weapon is it destroyed their own home planet's atmosphere. It literally went on fire. And this particular weapon also blew a giant hole inside their home planet. Cities burned, people died, plants and animals destroyed, everything was gone. Except for a few of these Alibrians, they had built magical bunkers and they holed themselves up in there to protect themselves from the damage that was wrought. Not everybody agreed with the move of destroying another planet, but it was something that happened. Another issue that the Alibrians ran into, unfortunate side effect, when you are blasted with radiation from using such a mega powerful super weapon, you tend to be a little infertile, so you can't propagate the species, which is exactly what happened. Some of the more powerful Alibrian mages, they decided to turn to undeath as a way to not only prolong their life, but to figure out if there was a way that they could undo the damage that they've done to their planet. This is how the first Bone Sages were created, essentially. And some of the OG Bone Sages, they still rule in Eox today. The Twins, or the planets that Eox blew up, were Damiar and Iovo. Unfortunately, it's thousands of years ago that this conflict happened between these three planets, and Eox won. Modern day Eox still remains a barren wasteland of death. What little atmosphere there is left on the planet is poisonous, and it's very, very thin. So if you are a living creature, you need to have hazmat suits or some space suits, and you need to be able to breathe poison or have that filtered out somehow. Basically, if you live, this isn't the place you want to go. Some plants and animals did survive the event. However, the runaway magic and the radiation that is a plague on this planet, it transformed them and they evolved. The Bone Sages function as tribes within the undead themselves. They all have their parcels of land, pieces of the planet that they control, little cities as well. And the Bone Sages make sure that they have an iron grip on the territories and the cities, the resources that they control. Now, there's not a lot of very populated cities on Eox, not to mention modern, since it's so hard to get stuff here. However, in the no man's land between cities, this is where you will find hordes of the undead, the monsters, various ruins from the Alibrians, since they are, no longer really here. There are still a few Alibrians left, they are just very rare. The largest city can be found where several Bone Sages territories intersect. So this is an important city on the planet. It's also a bit of a hotspot depending on which Bone Sage you live with or support. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves here, just so we're clear, this planet has so much going for it in terms of interesting locations and species, people that live on this planet, monsters that you can find here. We're going to have to do this in at least 2 parts. We'll see how much there is left to cover after this. If you're finding some value out of the video today though, let me know by giving a thumbs up. Then you can help me help you get more videos like this by subscribing and turning on the bell. As I mentioned just a little bit earlier before, Eox is broken up into several tribes, clans, fiefdoms. There's many names that you could call it. They would all be somewhat accurate. They are all ruled by a Bone Sage. And this is a title that carries some very significant weight behind it. You need to be powerful either politically or magically to be even considered for this title, and on top of that, you must also have at least several thousand vassals that report to you or that you are then in charge of to even be considered to be granted this title. Now, the Bone Sages as a whole, they present a unified front to the Pact Worlds, so whenever they go on emissary or anything else, they are all of the same mind. At least that's what they present. Behind closed doors, that could be a different story. And these Bone Sages are not necessarily evil. They are definitely amoral in the sense that they don't really care and they make their decisions based off of utilitarian outcomes. If it's beneficial for them to make a tough decision, they will do it regardless of the consequences, and they can do it fairly easily. As an example of this, Eox was the one pushing for the Treaty of the Pact Worlds to combine as a whole. In so doing, they joined a unified federation of planets, but in order to join this, they had to disband much of their military. And obviously some of this military was not happy with that, and this is how we get the Corpse Fleet. They are a disowned Eoxian navy. There is some rumors that although they are disowned and no longer part of Eox or the official Pact Worlds military might, or the Eoxians, there is rumors that the Bone Sages still have ties to the Corpse Fleet and are able to control them or direct them, give them information on some back channels. Since Eox had such a drastic reduction of its military might, they do still have protection for their planet, just not in the sense of a space navy. Instead, they have an orbital defense platform that destroys any incoming ships, and this is called Sentinel. If you count yourself among the living, going to Eox is not a particularly comfortable place for you. Eox still does have quite a bit of visitors, despite the fact that it's kind of like Space Australia and everything is trying to kill you. Many travelers come to Eox to get their necrografts. Prosthetics are also very cheap here because they're made of undead parts. A lot of dead bodies are purchased and brought here to be reanimated, used for indentured servitude, and repopulate the species. Because the only way to grow the species is to literally raise them from the dead. There are also those travelers seeking to prolong their own lives, and they come to Eox to basically be turned into undead creatures themselves. Now, the price to do this is actually significant. They must offer thousands of years of service, indentured servitude, to whoever has converted them for their undead body, because once you're undead, you cannot die from old age. Time takes on a whole different perspective. Some people will even come to this planet to participate in the games in the Halls of the Living, which I will get to in a little bit. There are many notable locations on this particular planet that I would like to talk to you about. I will not be able to cover all of them in this video, so look forward for a second Eox video from me. The Arron Rifts. There are two rifts. There is the Greater and Lesser Arron Rift. Both are hundreds of miles long, thousands of feet deep, and some of the most dangerous areas on Eox. In these particular places, there used to be some island chains or a subcontinent. The history that's known about these particular places isn't really clear on that. What is known for sure is that there was a cataclysmic event which caused the cracks to go right into the mantle of the planet. That's how deep these things are. There are strange metals here, bizarre fossils, because when you go that far down, you have a lot of history that you dig up. Some scholars and expeditioners, they feel that there was a vast cave system underneath the planet, one which housed its own life, its own ecology, its own biomes. When the expeditions have gone in and found some of these older caves, they found them to be rich in rare sky metals, as well as various other radioactive metals that are quite rare but needed in some high-end equipment and technology. They also find some ancient Eoxian artifacts here as well. Blackmoon is the remnants of a trap that was set by the Sarcesians. Essentially, in the years before the gap, there was a bunch of rock and debris around the planet. Essentially, before the gap, there was a ring of asteroids around Eox. The trap was that These rocks, or these asteroids, would come down on each individual city. They were tied to do so with magic, and for whatever reason, this trap was never actually sprung. However, the trap wasn't activated until the Bone Sages mounted an assault to take over Absalom's station. Nobody knows who activated the trap, but essentially this falling piece of rock crushed an Eoxian city. The city was called Myrthel, and it's rumored that the city still exists beneath the giant black dome, basically. This is now the tallest mountain range in the Pact Worlds, but this mountain range also is riddled with caves. Some hopeful undead have tried to turn it into a colony of their own, hoping to get the title of Bone Sage. However, it's not ever worked out for those. They've always died, mysteriously somehow. The Halls of the Living that I mentioned earlier, this is the city that the living will come to. It is a subterranean city, and it is designed specifically for breathers. The city is maintained only as a front though, since anybody who visits here can become a willing participant in the cruel and dangerous reality shows that are broadcast throughout the Pact Worlds, but they originate here. Many of the civilized areas in the Pact Worlds, they will ban these transmissions. However, when you're surfing the dark infosphere, it's really easy to find these rather gruesome images and feeds. Now, the Halls of the Living have been protested by locals as well as an international stage because it creates quite a bit of a hubbub. The problem is, because anyone who stays here is willing, it's not breaking any laws. Everyone who comes here is technically a willing participant. And if children are born here, they are removed to a government-run facility until they become of age, and then they are allowed to return to the city. Anybody who is staying in the city is allowed to leave any time they want. They get basically a one-way ticket to Absalom and whatever possessions they can carry. But the draw of being famous, or just the sheer amount of money you can get from participating in these games, even though they can kill you, it draws a lot of people, and there is a big waiting list to stay in the Halls of the Living. And some of the participants who are more famous and have a bigger following, they get to kind of skip all the deadly games and go right into the daily vlogs, going into skill-based challenges, and they get the adoration of all their fans. As I mentioned, anyone is allowed to participate in the games, however, it's primarily humans, Vesk, and some of the other Pact World species. Undead, however, are forbidden from playing the games. They're actually forbidden from even being in the city unless they are a camera crew. Now, these games, they have promoters, but there is one who stands head and shoulders above the rest. His name is Zoe. Zoe is flamboyant and alive with personality. He's undead, like he's dead, but the way he presents himself does not reflect his outer appearance. Any game that Zoe introduces or hypes up gets just extreme off-the-charts ratings. He will even go to areas that are a little less reputable within the Pact Worlds, or anywhere really, where he can find a contestant, and he will personally recruit those who show some interest or promise for him. It's because Zoe is so different that his ratings are just through the roof. When Eox joined the Pact Worlds, not everyone agreed with the decision. The Bone Sages especially. They disagreed with the Eternal Convocation and the Conclave of Whispers. They agreed with the decision. The Bone Sages felt that it put them in a position of weakness, and they were not okay with this. What followed was a civil war between the Bone Sages and the Eternal Convocation and the Conclave of Whispers. The details of this have been hidden from basically everyone except the undead. Now, the Bone Sages lost, and their armies were buried in the ground in stasis pods. This area became known as the Eternal Barrows. Now, the most powerful of the undead armies, the prisoners, vampires, ghosts, and the necrovites, the ones that you really needed to worry about, they were placed in stasis tombs, and they will not experience the passage of time. Their prison term was indefinite, so they will remain hidden and buried underground until they are forgotten, or until situations change and maybe they will be needed again. Exantius is the newest city on Eox. It was founded by undead from another world, and the Eternal Convocation gave them permission to do this, although somewhat reluctantly. Those in power are rather anxious about this particular city. They haven't given them a seat on any council. They are ruled over by some of the Bone Sages, who are also anxious about the city's growth, and they're worried about a shift in the balance of power. This city was created by a Sheeran corpsefolk mystic who goes by the name of Zertik. Now, this particular individual does not have any hidden motives. They don't have an agenda. They've been very transparent with everything that they've wanted to do. They just wanted to create a city that all undead could feel welcome in, because they felt that the Illibrian way of life just wasn't for them. Fading Run is another area tied to those Bloodsport games. Located in the Grey Hollow, these are where the sports or the sporting events, just the things that are too big to fit in the halls of the living, they go here instead. Demolition derbies, the big obstacle courses that will literally kill you. Many people die here. The casualty count is just staggering. Even here, you will find some protesters demanding that the games be shut down to prevent any future loss of life. But the Eoxian government is very quick to point out that anybody who plays in these games is doing so voluntarily. Grimreach is a ghost town located in Lacustria Hollow. Here you will find translucent buildings of Eoxian design. There is also phantoms and spirits of Eoxian people going about their daily business. The phantoms do not respond to any outside stimulus. They ignore anybody who isn't there. One theory is that this is a ghostly vision of a previous version of Eox. However, this particular place in Eoxian history would have been underwater, and any of the buildings that are there, they are not designed to be underwater. A hypothesis put forth by some other Eoxian mystics say that this is not a vision of the past, but a vision of Eoxian's future. They seem to think that Eox will recover and will have atmosphere once again. So they are of course studying the building design and the architecture to glean any information that they can about what this potential future could look like. Thank you so much to all of my patrons and the new ones, Miska's Maps, Kyle R. If you would like to learn a little bit more about the Pact Worlds, I have a playlist on the screen for you now, as well as one about the factions of Starfinder. My name's Nathaniel. Thanks for stopping by, everyone.